Minister Narendra Modi today in Ahmedabad talked about the scrappage policy, where he said wastage is wealth. That's the big theme that we are also picking up here on Startup Central. How can startups, entrepreneurs, investors make money from waste? Before that, here's the Prime Minister.
ये पॉलिसी नए भारत की मोबिलिटी को, ऑटो सेक्टर को नई पहचान देने वाली है। देश में व्हीकल पॉपुलेशन के मॉडर्नाइजेशन को, अनफिट व्हीकल्स को एक साइंटिफिक मैनर में सड़कों से हटाने में ये पॉलिसी बहुत बड़ी भूमिका निभाएगी। देश के करीब करीब हर नागरिक, हर इंडस्ट्री, हर क्षेत्र पर इससे सकारात्मक परिवर्तन आएगा। साथियों, आप सभी जानते हैं कि देश की अर्थव्यवस्था के लिए मोबिलिटी कितना बड़ा फैक्टर है। मोबिलिटी में आई आधुनिकता ट्रैवल और ट्रांसपोर्टेशन का बोझ तो कम करती ही है, आर्थिक विकास के लिए भी मददगार साबित होती है। रीयूज, रिसाइकल और रिकवरी के सिद्धांत पर चलते हुए ये पॉलिसी ऑटो सेक्टर में, मेटल सेक्टर में देश की आत्मनिर्भरता को भी नई ऊर्जा देगी। इतना ही नहीं, ये पॉलिसी देश में 10,000 करोड़ रुपए से अधिक का नया निवेश लाएगी और हजारों रोजगार का निर्माण करेगी।
That's what the Prime Minister said today. And how can you convert waste to wealth? We're taking forward that conversation here on Startup Central. In fact, the Prime Minister made a special mention of startups and invited them to look at this space. Joining us here on Startup Central today is Anurag Jain, the co-founder and CEO of Cardekho. We're also being joined by Nikhil Aggarwal, the founder and CEO of Invest, and Pooja Rai, the co-founder and CEO of Anthill Creations. Thanks a lot to all of you for joining us this Friday evening. I'll come first to you, Anurag. You know, the backdrop, of course, is to do with scrapping vehicles. While the jury is out as far as the incentives go, the states should get more, users should get more, car companies should get more. Startups like yours, as far as scrappage goes, what is it really going to mean? Is it going to mean, you know, whether it's you or, you know, whether car trades, Cars 24, whatever, will all of you operating in this space have no choice but to open new verticals as far as scrappage goes?
So, I think first of all, I would like to welcome the policy and changes that our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi has announced today. I mean, this has been long due for India. Most of the countries globally have their own vehicle scrappage policy programs, and they have been more than a decade old in terms of efficacy. So India is, I think, right over there in terms of timing because of the pandemic situation, the personal mobility needs have started to grow a lot more. And with the personal mobility needs starting to grow a lot more, I think the quality of vehicles that fly on the road needs to be apt for from a vehicular pollution perspective as well as the cost of vehicles perspective. So with all these factors into play, I think this is going to be a welcome change, and the average quality of vehicles will definitely increase significantly, and it puts pressure on players like us who are into used car segment, whether into buying vehicles or selling vehicles, to make sure that all the vehicles are compliant, they pass fitness tests. So with all the compliance needs and regulatory needs around fitness tests, all of us will also be inspecting around those parameters and variables to make sure that the fleet that the country has is fit and clean and green. So it's a welcome change. I think I must appreciate what's happening right now.
Okay, before we go any further, let's just actually bring you up to speed with what the scrappage policy as of now stands to be. Karishma now joining us with that. Karishma, the invitation is to entrepreneurs as well as to startups to make this a lucrative organized venture. So far, scrappage yards, all of that is in the disorganized space. As of now, what is the scrappage policy?
Well, right, it's a much awaited announcement that has actually come in. It's a formal notification by Prime Minister Modi. And if you remember, it was formally also introduced in budget through a draft notification, and then details of fine print was given early this year, where, of course, the government is trying to focus on modernizing the vehicle fleet. They've also given certain key, of course, highlights on this. And after much discussions, it was decided that about 4 to 6% incentive will be given to consumers from the manufacturers who are willing to scrap their old vehicle in return of course, the next new one. Besides this, what's interesting to note is that though this is voluntary in nature, it's mandatory to do a vehicle fitness test, and a vehicle that is, of course, beyond 15 years and not in the right state will have to be scrapped, of course, and that will receive certain incentives from the government in terms of registration fee and green tax, and in fact 25% less road tax. So while of course it's been quite a lot of debate that has happened around this when it comes to the industry and the government, we now see a formal implementation from Prime Minister Modi, and now that the process for the personal and commercial vehicles is going to start in 2023, it looks like scrappage finally is soon going to become a reality after prolonged discussions.
Okay, thanks, Karishma, for joining us with that. Nikhil, can I come to you now? Now we know the basic contours of this. The reason we've got you here is because GRIP believes it's going to stand to benefit from the scrappage policy, even though it's in the business of leasing electric vehicles. Why?
Thanks for that question. I think there are many initiatives the government is taking, and one of them is to encourage electric vehicles. The scrappage policy does encourage people to look at newer vehicles, and with the coming of the age of vehicles, electric vehicles, that cost coming down, as well as interesting financing models, including leasing coming up, there is an incentive or a further incentive for people now to switch to electric vehicles. I believe the scrappage policy is one more push in that direction. And the way I see it is one more electric vehicle on the road encourages a new cycle to start in terms of infrastructure, charging infrastructure, and more adoption of vehicles. So it is incredibly exciting from a production as well as deployment perspective for electric vehicles to have this policy in place.
But why will leasing of electric vehicles take off? Is the case that you're making that after they scrap vehicles, they'll buy electric vehicles? Because it's still not a mass product.
Yeah, so I'm making two different cases. The first is that if you are taking a product away and you're forcing, even though it's voluntary based on a fitness test, if you're giving an incentive to scrap your vehicle, there is an opportunity at that point of time, purchase point of time, to think of buying a diesel or petrol vehicle and buying an electric vehicle. There are several incentives the government is offering apart from just pure economics to choose an electric vehicle. The reason leasing will make, and that's the second point, is that, my friends talked about a personal vehicle, but we are actually seeing a significant shift towards shared mobility. Majority of mobility in the next decade will be electric and will be shared. And that's where leasing comes into play. So an individual will now have the option to make a choice because he is forced to scrap. At the same time, as mobility becomes shared, there is an opportunity for leasing to grow. The combination of both creates an opportunity for leasing in electric vehicles.
Okay, fair point. If I can now go across to my next guest and to try and understand what exactly it is that is going on over here, and someone who can tell us already about creating wealth from waste. Pooja, welcome to StartUp Central. Tell us a little bit about what Anthill is doing, and then I'll ask you my next question.
Sure, thank you so much. Hi everyone. So at Anthill, what we're trying to do is basically use the tires and waste which is produced in high numbers. I mean, if you look at numbers, right, 981 million tires are thrown away every year and only 7% is recycled. So what we are trying to do is reuse these old tires in making children's parks and playgrounds. So we use close to 70, 80 tires in building climbers and swings for children. So, this is a waste and we don't know. It is very difficult to discard tires. You can't put them in the land. If you burn them, it, deteriorates the environment. So what we are doing is creating an example of how a waste can be made into something which is so useful and need of the hour. Yeah.
So you're literally making playgrounds, is what I understand, from these tires, which would just go to the landfill, just create more waste and all of that. But is this a lucrative business, is a question I want to ask you.
So I feel any business is lucrative if it is creating value. And I feel we have sort of found wealth in the waste, right? Like instead of buying new material like metal or plastic, we are reusing something. And the playgrounds that we build are more durable because tires as a material is very strong and it is made to last, and that's why it is so difficult to decompose it. So we have been able to use something which is a waste into something which is very useful. So we reduce the cost of building the same playground by 50%. So it is definitely creating more value.
Okay, Anurag, let me come to you. You have Cardekho, which is a Soonicorn. It's understood that, you may be going in for a fundraise, IPO, all of that. Will Cardekho, as a for-profit company, look at creating value from waste? Is that something you could look at? Is that the way it's going to be headed? Can this become an organized sector?
I think the sector will definitely become organized because there will be large scrapyards which people will operate and extract value from the vehicle. And if you plan your scrapyard well, I believe when you put in the extracted products back into the supply chain, approximately 30 to 40% of a new vehicle cost can be kind of subsidized by reusing the steel and copper and other materials that you generate out of the vehicle scrap. Having said that, Cardekho as an organization, as of today, I think there'll be auto manufacturers who probably should be jumping into the fray on the old vehicle scrapping yards, or maybe some private players. But we would like to focus on the bets we are playing on, which is primarily used cars, new cars, insurance and lending. But this is one thing which we can look at some point of time, but not today.
Fair point. But Anurag, as a consumer, a consumer would probably want to get rid of the car that needs to be scrapped while buying the car, not deal with too many entities. So in that sense, isn't there a void?
So we already do that, by the way. I mean, so as a facilitator, we have an auctions platform where we kind of auction these vehicles off as a platform. So we can continue to do that. So from that perspective, the consumer can still come to us and get his car to be sold to scrap. And we will be tying up with all these scrap yards to kind of facilitate the supply chain. So we already do that for insurance companies, by the way, but we can continue to do that for the retail consumers as well.
Okay, Nikhil, if I can come to you now, wealth to waste. Now, we know about so many parts that go into an EV. It's a brand new business. It's difficult to believe right now about an EV going as far as scrappage goes. But, you've made a very interesting point and a very pertinent point that when one goes to waste and they're going to buy a new asset, which is going to be depreciating right from the word go, there's going to be an opportunity. How will you play on this opportunity?
And just to clarify what I said earlier, there have to be multiple other incentives, which thanks to the government, there are. Many states have taken their own initiatives to promote electric vehicles. We're seeing a lot of it on the commercial side, especially two-wheelers and three-wheelers. But I believe that we'll start seeing it a lot more on in the four-wheeler space as well. I'm based in Mumbai, and it's not infrequent to see a electric vehicle personally owned car that comes about. I believe that as a combination of the various incentives, there is possibly an opportunity to to make that. And I would urge the government to think about maybe giving a higher incentive for scrappage if it is linked to purchase of an electric vehicle. For example, the government has said that the road tax will be waived off, registration fees will be 25% lesser. But if the same could be incentivized to a greater extent for electric vehicles, maybe that transition will happen faster. I also want to make you mentioned something in the beginning on electric vehicles being earlier in the process. Actually, electric vehicles probably have a shorter life than the diesel and petrol vehicles. And there is a case to be made for how to do scrappage for electric vehicles, especially batteries, which can be incredibly harmful for the environment. And what we are doing is to work with secondary life companies to use the same batteries for energy storage, right? And creating wealth from waste. So even with respect to electric vehicles, which is completely new, there is an opportunity from scrappage.
What should be the ideal life for an electric vehicle to be scrapped then?
You're getting me into a tough question. So I think the general science out there seems to suggest that a battery for an electric vehicle, at least two-wheeler, three-wheeler, is probably good for 2 to 3 years, depending obviously on the cycle and the usage, as well as the way it's maintained. The body of the vehicle can actually last probably longer, and is, depending on the use case, again, could go up till 7 to 8 years. But the question really from a scrappage perspective and environment perspective, as well as what the Prime Minister said in terms of being able to leverage this policy to use rare earth minerals again and to recycle them into production, lies in the battery, right? It's the lithium, which we are today importing entirely from China, that we could really leverage by having a scrappage policy around batteries.
Okay. I'm going to give the final comments of this discussion to Pooja, because she's already creating wealth from wastage. She says you can always add value. Pooja, the message today has been to create wealth from waste. You've not answered me, straight up whether it's a monetarily lucrative business. Is that something you aspire to do? And where all are you building these playgrounds? Are you only going to stick to upcycling tires?
Yeah, so, I want to emphasize on the fact, on the 3 components that Prime Minister focused on: reduce, reuse, and recycle. So I believe we cannot solve a problem by just upcycling. We have to have, reduce and reuse as well in the process, and that is when we solve a problem. So we didn't start this solution or this organization to make monetary benefits. We wanted to solve a problem. We saw that there is a need of play, and we saw there is this huge number of waste which is getting discarded, and as designers, we were able to bring both the pieces together. And I feel what we are trying to do here is create behavioral change and make people accept that even after reusing something, you can actually create better products. So a lot of times you hear from people that because it is made out of something which is a waste, it is not as good. So I think we're trying to change that mindset. We have built these playgrounds across the country in 18 different states, villages and metro cities, some very prominent public spaces as well. And it is also, making cities more child-friendly in a very sustainable way. So yeah, I mean, that's what I feel, that we need a lot more solutions. We need, and I'm very happy this policy has come out, because it is only when government, startups, citizens, all of them to come together is when we can sort of solve a problem. Yeah.
Fair point. Okay. Keep up the good work, Pooja. It's been a pleasure to have you here on ET Now. I'd also like to thank my other 2 guests who've been a part of this Friday evening broadcast. Tricks on how to create wealth from waste.